Welcome to N is for Networking. I'm Holly Metlitsky. I've been working in networking for about 2 years now, and honestly, every day I'm learning something new. It's been a whirlwind of studying, certifications, and real-world experience, and I'm loving it. With me, as always, is Ethan Banks. Ethan's been in the industry for about 30 years and has a ton of deep networking expertise, so I get to learn from him right alongside all of you. If you're not already, follow us on LinkedIn and join the Packet Pushers community Slack. It's a great way to connect, share ideas, and keep the conversation going. Now, today's episode is a little different. We're doing a mock interview. Ethan and I are going to interview a candidate who's applying for a junior network administration role. The goal is to give them feedback and at the same time help anyone who's listening who might be preparing for a job in networking. And also, something new for those of you who have feedback, questions, comments, and so on for us. We want you to send us a voicemail. Record it on your phone using the voice memo apps or anything you have, and email it to n4nvoicemail@packetpushers.net. That's N4N for the number, voicemail@packetpushers.net. We'll include your voicemails in future episodes. On to the mock interview. Our candidate, Toni, is here with us applying for the Junior Network Administration position at Packet Herders Incorporated.
Okay, that was that was a lame company name. It's what I had. Packet Herders Incorporated. Sure. So Toni, thanks for raising your hand to be our mock interview candidate. And in fairness, you have some experience in networking already. Just so that people know, you do have some background in this, and you're just willing to be our guinea pig and be a little bit vulnerable as we ask you some questions and stuff. So, okay, so let's go into interview mode, Toni. I'll lead off with the first question, as Holly and I are your panelists that are going to be interviewing you. Let's start with a simple opening question. Tell us briefly who you are and your experience with networking so far, including any qualifications or certs that you might have.
Hi, I'm Toni Mrowetz. I'm currently a network engineer at the United Kingdom Atomic Energy Authority. Network experience, I did about 1 year of network administration, and the last 2 years I've been network engineer. Qualifications, I have none. I'm entirely self-taught. I'm mostly lab stuff if I run into troubles.
So you say you have no qualifications particularly. Does that mean like no certifications, nothing like that?
I started the CCNA. I never sat the exam, and that's where it stopped.
So you did a little bit of the training to try to get the exam, but just never took the certification?
Yeah, that's right. Plus, current work-wise, we're not a Cisco shop.
You said okay. you are or not a Cisco shop?
We are not a Cisco shop.
Okay.
We're multi-vendor, but yeah.
Okay, so CCNA training particularly maybe wouldn't have been that interesting to you. Did you look at anything like CompTIA Network Plus?
No, not really.
Okay.
I don't know, maybe I'm just wired differently.
Okay.
Okay, so then, so you've done a little bit of labbing and obviously you work in the industry. So perhaps you can describe a network you've worked on, explain the sorts of admin tasks you performed in the network. And if you've never worked on a production network, I know you mentioned that you enjoy labbing stuff, so you can speak a little bit to that as well.
So our site is 2,500 users, 600 switches, about 20 firewalls physical. We don't have much cloud, have a little bit, but because of Brexit, it's kind of off the table, and because of the research work we do. Topology-wise, or watch networks I've worked on, I'm currently working on a GPU cluster. I've done plenty of private networks for diagnostics, remote control, that kind of stuff. Obviously, one of my first projects was the new HQ office network deployment. So that was brand new hardware that we've never used before. Networking tasks, tickets, firewall management, a lot of .1x because we use ClearPass for the network access control. What else? We also, if you want to feel really old, we still have FigNet. Yes.
For real?
Yes. I actually had to re-enable it a couple of months ago because we unplugged it and someone came screaming.
Okay.
Yeah, don't ask. If you work for a data center, you probably see the history of IT.
Okay, so a bunch of things to follow up on there. One, I think you said private networking. Can you expand on that?
So we obviously have like the user networks, which is mostly rooted or is accessible from anyone from anywhere. Then we have certain networks, either they be firewalled or they're air-gapped completely. Which, like one of the private networks, the only way in is actually through the management interface on the switches. There's no other way in. It's completely segregated and air-gapped because of the nature of the work they do.
So when you're saying private networking, that means you're talking about a secure network because it sounds like because of regulatory requirements, you need these networks to be very secure because of the environment you're working in.
Correct.
And then what was your level of setting those up? Did you work with them? Were you actually configuring, this is what it means to make this network secure, and then building firewall policy or designing how you're actually going to get at this air gap network like you were just describing?
So one of them I did was they have basically research cells with diagnostic equipment in them, which has to be remote controlled from a control room. That is completely air-gapped. There's only there's multiple networks in there. So one of them is for remote control, and then one of them is for data acquisition. And the data acquisition network has one leg into a server in a different DC for data export, but that's it.
Do you manage that?
What do you mean?
Are you I don't want to say sole person, but the person who's managing those devices through those management interfaces? So something goes wrong, you the go-to.
Yes.
Okay.
We have a team of 4 network engineers. 5, sorry.
Okay. Okay, so you're on a team. Okay. So you're one of the team of 5?
Yep.
Got it. You mentioned 600 switches supporting about 2,500 people. So that's an awful lot of switches. So I'm guessing there's a data center involved here?
Yes. So we have one big data center. Maybe I should go into the history a bit. So JET, which is the fusion reactor for the EU. They don't run any VLANs. Everything is physically segregated. The whole backend is Solaris-based, so that's one of the networks. Office buildings, we have way too many, because we're based on an old airfield. Then we have also some satellite offices. We have acquired recently a new 100-hectare site, which is going to be the building site for a demo. Again, be another couple of thousand people there. And then because of all the labs, so we have a lot of local labs that need their own private networking or firewalled. And so devices we just keep having more and more devices, unfortunately.
Now
a lot of it is layer 2 only.
You mentioned no VLANs because everything's segregated. They're all these separate little networks. It sounds like. Okay, are you routing between those networks? Are they all truly physically separated, or are they interconnected in some way?
We do have a backbone network just for the interconnection between the networks, but once it leaves that area, everything is physically segregated. So we end up with a lot of racks that have way too many switches in just to supply every single network.
All right. So tell us about that backbone then. Is this a routed backbone?
Yeah. So I don't want to give out any names, but we have a backbone network, which is routing between a lot of like the data acquisition networks and the control networks. And then we have all the different clusters depending on, I'm not entirely sure how the Solaris side works. So we have something called subsystems. And different subsystems have different responsibilities for the fusion reactor.
And then what protocol are you using for the routing, if any?
That one is using RIP.
Old school. Okay.
Wow.
Look at you guys.
It's very old, yes. That's why I know we work on Jet, but Jet is very old and it's now finished, luckily. So,
okay.
Are there any plans to migrate to a more modernized network, or is it if
on
it ain't
Jet,
broke,
no.
don't fix it?
On Jet, no, we don't touch it because there's no budget left.
Okay, so you are operating in a budget constrained environment.
Mm-hmm.
On this side, for sure, yeah.
Okay, well, okay, so that sounds qualified. As in, some of your projects are perhaps well funded, and some of your projects are not.
Yes,
I have been in that environment myself. Yeah.
So to expand maybe, so we have Jet, so this is fully segregated of the grid, firewalled. The only way in is usually tunneling, and even then you usually have to have another person that actually allows you to tunnel. Then the office network, we are now mostly an Aruba shop. We're trying to get rid of all of our extreme hardware, which that is running OSPF. We've recently removed parts of all the last remnants of RIP. The core's been upgraded to 100 gig backbone. Currently also in the process of acquiring some MSP grade firewalls to supply the required bandwidth that we need.
Okay, so Aruba, I think of Aruba primarily as a wireless shop, but of course they've got a lot of physical switches and so on. When you say you're mostly an Aruba shop, and don't give away any secrets that you're not allowed to give away, obviously, but if you can talk about the Aruba environment, can you describe it a bit?
Well, CLI-wise, it's pretty standard compared to Cisco-ish. It's pretty good compared to like Extreme or some of the other HPs.
So you are using Aruba switches?
Yes.
So
Okay.
CX switches.
So a standard edge switch, for example, would be 6200, and then we are running a lot of 8300s. It's like top of rack in a DC, and the core is 6400 chassis based.
Do you use any of Aruba's management platforms to manage those switches?
We were looking at it, and we got a quote, and that fell through.
Okay.
We use Aruba ClearPass for network access for the office side. But yeah.
Now, you said ClearPass for, I think you said for NAC, or I interpreted you to say network admission control. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you get into the guts of ClearPass and work on radius and policy and all that kind of stuff?
Yep, that's one of my responsibilities is the actual ClearPass.
So,
and I believe you mentioned that you do a lot of .1x as well there.
Yeah. So we do machine authentication, obviously, for any of the domain laptops, and then we also do .1x for the individual users.
So if Ethan walks in with his laptop fresh off the street and I plug into the wall, tell me what happens. You
will get denied access. Because
why? Walk me through it.
For starters, you don't have the machine certs. You're not on the domain for the laptops. If you wanted to, you can be allowed on, but you would have to get your laptop scanned by IT help desk for virus, see that you have all the requirements. Then we can allow you onto the guest LAN, which only allows you internet access, similar to Wi-Fi. Then, if your machine is allowed on, then obviously we also query AD for the .1x to see that you're a valid user.
Mm-hmm. So it would be, is it more or less the same process whether I'm going in wired or wireless?
We don't have a business side wireless. We only have a guest wireless.
Okay.
So if you wanted to be on the Wi-Fi, you then would have to VPN in.
If I land on your guest wireless, what network access do I have and not have?
Only internet. You're straight routed to the internet. That's it.
What are my bounds? What from a back-end perspective, how do you know that I'm locked down, that I can't get at the rest of the network?
Because the traffic is basically routed through the wireless link controller, and which is only connection is the firewall, the perimeter firewall.
Okay. You mentioned you're getting rid of some legacy Extreme gear that was running OSPF. Are you replacing like an Extreme switch with an Aruba switch? Is it that sort of a project?
So about 2014, I think, we deployed voice or VoIP, and we did a whole Office Edge refreshed. So that meant we ripped everything out. Everything got replaced by Extreme. The original design was a collapsed core. We've kind of outgrown that. So now we have core aggregation edge layer, or access layer, sorry. And again, this is now end of life because our current core only runs up to 40 gigs. It's an old 5400 chassis HP. So now it gets replaced with 6200s and 6400s Aruba.
100 gig backbone you mentioned. Do you have talk about the physical infrastructure that supports that? Is this fiber running around the campus, that sort of thing?
Well, so the site used to be an RAF base, so you can imagine the size.
As in Royal Air Force?
Yes.
Okay.
3 runways, so we're quite big. Currently in the process of moving our internet circuits to be diverse. So currently it's one DC, but we're going to move it into another DC. So we have a much smaller data center in our new HQ. These firewalls need to be upgraded because they're no longer really up to spec with the new requirements that we have. The new core has been put in, is not in production fully yet because we have a new GPU cluster going live, which requires 100 gigs bandwidth. And we're also working on a Science DMZ. Again, high bandwidth requirements.
Okay.
They want at least 100 gig plus.
You move a lot of data around this network then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you also interacting with other organizations that need access to that data or that you're getting data from perhaps?
So for our GPU cluster, I know for sure CERN are very interested. So the Hadron Collider in Switzerland, France.
Mm-hmm.
We work a lot with universities, obviously, and other labs. We work a lot with, I can't remember the name, Hartree, which I think is up in Liverpool. We also do lots of HPC with Cambridge Uni. But again, our IT department is so big, it's kind of split in half. We have like data scientists, and then we have actual IT ops or operations.
Is that GPU cluster being linked to like an AI, ML, machine learning cluster? So is that linked to for training and, or if you can say?
It will be used for fusion reactor digital twin, so visualization.
Okay.
If you want me to go into it, it's 64 GPUs, so 64 sessions. Again, we're currently looking at also offering it to other universities' labs so they can remote access into the cluster, as well as obviously Intel use.
Holly, that was the last question I had from that section. Did you have other questions for Toni in that section?
No, I think we can. I'm curious about what he mentioned on his resume. Toni, I believed on your resume you mentioned that you were involved with a project to do an Office or Edge refresh.
Yep.
Can you talk about that project a little bit, what your specific role was in it, and any interesting technical challenges you faced and how you overcame those?
So this was before the current Edge refresh happened. I think it happened 1 or 2 years ago. So we kind of had our extreme setup, nice and working. Because of the office being so big, we needed a new aggregation. Again, we tried to move away from extreme. So we used, in this case, we used HP Comware for 10 gig distribution. And on the edge, we used 2930Fs, I want to say, HP, not Arubas. So slightly different. Challenges were, originally we were planning to even use it as a gateway. I quite quickly found out that HP Comware and Extreme don't play ball when you use VRP.
Really? Okay. I mean, no. I've not been in that specific situation. You'd think that'd be straightforward
standard
enough.
IEEE standard, isn't it? So,
right.
But it's not. We found out that the Extreme seems to use a very old code, and it was expecting a checksum, which has been deprecated a long time ago. So we abandoned that plan.
So the migration plan was to set up the old and the new as a VRRP pair, and then you could switch the gateway address over to the new switch when you were ready to switch over, and as a way to swing traffic from the community into the new infrastructure, and then you could retire the old.
Yeah. Well, no, both at the same time, but obviously being a redundancy, so you just have the .3 floating IP as your gateway.
Right. Yeah.
Then use. Well, VRP is not load balancing, but yeah.
When you ran into that issue, the VRP issue, what did the process look like to get to the root cause? How did you figure out that it was the checksum that was causing this problem?
In the end, we talked to actual TAC. And I think we found out that reality, we're running an old code base on the extremes. I would guess that would be the culprit on this one, but we're too afraid to touch it.
Yes.
Because the solution would have been, what do you think?
Well, I've mentioned it on Slack before. We've had these extremes crash or randomly reboot and come up back blank multiple times. Yeah, it's not fun.
No.
Okay. So so you did not want to risk, if there was an update from Extreme for that old code that would have perhaps gotten you to functional VRRP, it was not worth the risk because of the age of those switches. Yeah.
It's because that distribution / core layer at the time it's a very strange setup. So it's 4 routers or 4 switches. Two are stacked with each other, and then we're running MC lag across the 2. But they're also geographically diverse. So stack member 1 sits in one location, stack member 2 sits in the other, and then for the other one, it's the other way around.
Oh, fun. Okay.
So, and then obviously once you start stacking, depending on which vendor you use, firmware upgrades are not that straightforward, especially if you're not fully redundant.
No, and with the geographical diversity, you also run much higher than average risk of a split brain. Was that something you ran into?
We have, yeah. I've caused an outage myself once. And then the second stack member 2 decided, no, I'm blank now.
Okay.
What did you do that caused that outage?
We were swapping some connections around.
Like physical connections?
That was before I was really working networking. So before I worked in the documentation side, so I basically know the physical infrastructure like the back of my hand because I've documented most of it. The drawing was wrong, and I asked, can I make it match the drawing? And the manager at the time said yes, so I did. But there was both stack cables of that stack. So, yeah.
So that's interesting, because at the time, you weren't really a network engineer in a position where you would understand the implications of getting those cables wrong if you got them wrong. You got the go-ahead to go ahead and do it. You just did it. There was an outage. Yes. And in hindsight, you figured out what went wrong.
As soon as I unplugged them both, I was like, oh, crap.
All right, Toni, we got one more question here for you. Would you explain how you find answers when you don't have them?
Oh, wow. In terms of what? Technical?
Yeah, you're facing some kind of a network challenge. It could be a million things. It could be how you configure something. It could be what are the capabilities of this device. It could be anything along those lines that is technical, esoteric, specific to your discipline, maybe unique to your working environment. I mean, what's your process when you need to know something and you don't have the information?
If it's like work or site related, luckily I have a really good relationship with my manager. So he would be a starting point. If he doesn't know, then it's either start looking at, depending on what the challenge is, looking at spec sheets, Google, obviously, because I don't know all the CLIs off the top of my head. Start digging through any documentation we have on site. I mean, we're usually pretty good, especially when it comes to physical stuff. Yeah, I'm not sure. Otherwise, labbing.
Mm-hmm.
I have, after AutoCon 3, I kind of looked at Container Lab pretty deeply, and I've started to pre-build our current infra in multiple Container Lab instances so that everyone can have a play when they need to.
Holly, do you have any more questions for Toni?
How often has your lab broken and you've had to fix it?
I've probably knew the Container Lab VMs more than 10 times. Because I'm also it's Linux based. I'm not that good with Linux yet. So I just started fresh. Just nuke it.
Mm-hmm. So it's beauty of labbing. You can't quite do that with your production system.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've brought production down too, but it's other stories.
Okay, why don't we call that the end of the interview for now? I mean, ordinarily, Toni, in most interviews, I would ask you, hey, do you have any questions for us? Kind of with the expectation that you would have done some research on the company and maybe we're curious about this or that, wanted to know about our environment, these kind of things. But we're not going to go that direction today because Packet Herders is an imaginary company that we made up for fun. So that's not really a thing. Okay, so let's walk through your answers. I'll give you my perspective on what I was looking for, and Holly, please chime in along the way.
Sure.
The opening question was, tell us briefly who you are and your experience with networking so far, including any qualifications or certs that you might have. So here are the things that I was looking for. That question included the word brief. A lot of people, especially when they're in an interview situation, they don't listen very well and they just go on and on, talking about themselves. If someone asks you for brief, they really are looking for just kind of a brief introduction to kind of, get a baseline on you and get a read. And you were appropriately brief, Toni. You listened well. Another thing that I'm looking for in that question is, do you state your experience plainly in a straightforward way, or do you bloviate? Are you making up a bunch of stuff to kind of like fluff up who you are and your qualifications and make you seem more awesome than you really are? And I'm
probably the opposite.
Yeah.
And yeah, you didn't do that at all. I agree with that. But I have interviewed a lot of people over the years, and there are some people that they seem to feel that they got to talk really big about all this stuff or make something that's not especially exciting or scintillating of a skill be like it's this huge thing, and they really overstate who they are and what they did. I'm sorry, Colleen.
No, I was going to say on that, I think you understated what you do a little bit.
I agree.
You definitely I've kind of been a network engineer for a little bit and I don't really have any certs. And I think that once we started asking more questions about what you do a lot, and you do a lot of network engineering, but the way you described yourself was definitely less than what you actually do. So
yep.
And so for those of you listening, this kind of a question can cut both ways. Yeah, you don't want to, fluff yourself up, and because people are going to see right through that, especially if they've got any kind of technical background, they'll cut right through that nonsense. On the other hand, you're there to advocate for yourself. You're being interviewed. You're a candidate for a position. There might be 3 other people in the mix with you. Who knows? So you want to be also upfront about what you did and honest. Don't fall prey to imposter syndrome. There's a balance there.
And confident. I'm looking for someone who is confident in themselves, because I can't employ someone who isn't sure of what they can do. So you can, without overselling yourself, you're in your role for a reason, and you know what you can do, and it's okay to share that in a confident manner.
The part about certifications and what I was looking at there was more to get your take on. It's like, I actually don't care if you have any certs, honestly, for the average job. The only time I would care about your certifications is if I was working for a partner or a vendor that really I needed you to have a particular cert. Because maybe in that partner relationship, I have to have people on staff with those certs or whatever. In this case, no. Packet Herders wasn't looking for anybody with a cert particularly, but it's an interesting question because certification, some people get the cert and that's like the thing for them. I got this cert. Okay. But like Holly, you and I have had these back and forth dialogues about certs, because you've gotten certs and thought like, yeah, I got the cert, but I don't know what that even means exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if I want to tell people that I have these certs. Like, they're there, but I 100% appreciate your desire to lab things out and learn yourself than if you came and said, oh, I've got all these certs, but I've never touched a lab.
Maybe I've become too disillusioned. I'm not sure. I've heard too many personal horror stories of, like, we've interviewed CCNP qualified people.
Yeah.
And you ask them like a question, can you name a layer 2 loop prevention protocol? And they go, don't know.
And a lot of people are skeptical that way. And so to have that kind of a perspective is valuable. It tells, it tells me as an interviewer, you don't overvalue your cert, or if you hesitate, I got the cert, I learned some things. It's not the end all and the be all. I actually value my hands-on experience more. That's telling to me, as opposed to, I got my CCNA and it's everything in the world, and you're so excited that you got your CCNA. So that's where I was headed with that. All right, the next question we asked you, Toni, was describe a network you've worked on and explain the sorts of admin tasks you performed on that network. And if you've never worked on a production network, talk about your home lab. Okay, there's a lot here that's going on. And from my perspective, this question is not about the specifics of the work. It's like, I'm not expecting you to say, I need you to say BGP and OSPF and .1x and STP. And I'm not looking for like a list of technical achievements. I'm looking for your communication ability. Can you describe clearly the network that you worked on in a way that it makes sense, it's easy to understand, and it's clear to me you understood that network very well? I'm not so worried again about the specifics of it. You're working on a network that had RIP. Okay, there's not that many networks that are going to be looking for that particular skill set. But it's interesting that you have a routing protocol, in the mix, and that you've worked on it a bit. It sounds like there was a little bit of OSPF there and so on. But more to the point for me, you were able to communicate that network. And Holly and I kept digging. We were going back and forth. Okay, you said this. What does that mean? Okay, you said mostly Aruba network. Well, I think of that as mostly a wireless play. Are you running their switches? Yes, I am. And here's the switch models, and here's the operating system. And you talk through it. Oh, yeah, we're doing ClearPass with our Aruba as well for NAC, and here's why. Again, we just kept digging and digging and digging. The point of the digging for me was, again, that communication ability. Can you talk about the network in detail? Because that demonstrates to me what you really did, what you really knew. And I have found in interviewing people that when you start to dig, a lot of times they're like, well, actually, what I did was I was in kind of a supporting role, and I never really did it hands on too much. But our network did those things, I guess, and they don't really actually understand any of that stuff. Well, we'll describe the network. Okay, you say you have, a backbone. What does it do? And and then they kind of fumble, and they can say words, they can, parrot things they've heard from other people, but they don't actually understand what's going on as soon as you dig in. And so that was the point of that question. Can you communicate? Did you really do this stuff on a deep level that you're claiming that you did? That is important stuff. Now, for a junior admin position, I'm sorry, Holly, go ahead.
No, that's exactly where I was going. So carry on.
Okay. So for a junior admin position, the other point I was going to make was, if you haven't worked on a production network in any significance, but you're a lab enthusiast, you do a lot of stuff in labs and lab environments that's interesting to you, and you can talk through different technologies that you play with. That carries weight with somebody like me. Okay, it's a junior admin position. You don't have hands-on experience, maybe. Maybe you've been in a help desk role for a long time, and you're like, really want to make the leap, and now you want to get into networking. Okay, if you really want to make the leap and you really want to get into networking, that means you've been spending time on this stuff, right? On your own, learning it and figuring it out. Now, Toni, in your case, not a big deal. You've been doing hands-on stuff for a while. And so, different conversation, but to me, again, going back to the first question, you understated a lot of things. And in this question, as we kept digging, you kept being like, oh yeah, well, I worked on this. Well, yeah, we worked on that. And yeah, I do. Well, there's 600 switches, and there's no VLANs because we got these unusual requirements. And the way you described is felt very evident to me, without like, what command would you type on this switch? I mean, I didn't get into that level of detail. I don't even know the commands myself necessarily, but it was to figure out exactly what level you were at, and you're right in the thick of it. You're right in the mix, deep.
And then the way you described the network clearly showed that perhaps maybe you haven't even configured all the boxes. We don't need to know that, but you have a clear understanding of every single part of that network and how it fits together. And that was, I think, for a network administrator role, that's really important, to understand how all those pieces fit together. And you demonstrated that very well.
So for those of you that are listening out there, this is another thing to ponder. A different way that I could have phrased that question, if we were in a conference room, let's say, and a different way I like to do it. If there's a whiteboard in that conference room, I would say to the person I'm interviewing, hey, grab a marker and draw the network you've worked on the board and start talking us through it. And they'll draw switches and firewalls and lines and explain it, and it'll make sense and look good, or it won't. They'll be like, I've seen people absolutely disintegrate because they were unable to illustrate, what's going on that board. But that's another way that I've asked this question. In fact, if you're listening and if you do a search for 4 interview questions, Ethan Banks, there should be an article I wrote back in like 2013 about some questions I asked and what I'm looking for, if you want to read up on that kind of stuff. So, but again, I
love the idea of whiteboarding, because that's one thing that terrifies me. Like, I can do it, but the idea of it is awful. I don't know what it is about it. There's something, like, it's because it's you on the spot. You have to, it's easy to talk through things, but now you have to visualize it in a way that's going to make sense for the person looking at your scribbles, and talk through it at the same time. It's everything in one.
But it also illustrates how you think. And that's another thing that I'm looking for when I talk to candidates, is how you think. It's not the specific experience necessarily, right? I'm not looking for this necessarily, a checklist of like protocols and whatever. I mean, maybe it depends on the role, but it's like, well, how does your brain work? Do you have the kind of a mind that I think maps well to network engineering? I want to see that illustrated in some way. All right, Toni, question 3 we had asked, your resume says that you were involved in a project to do an Office Edge refresh. Talk about that project, your role in it, and the interesting technical challenges that you faced. And I think this is another thing that I like to do. You say you did a thing in your resume, I'm going to ask you about the thing. Don't tell me something in your resume, thump your mighty chest about this thing you did. And then I ask you questions about it and you're like, oh, well, actually, that's no good. Case in point, I interviewed a candidate once who says he spent a lot of time working on an MPLS network. What he meant was, my company uses a service provider's MPLS network and I configure the edge router that plugs into it with IP. What do you know about MPLS? Talk to me about tag switching. Not a thing in the world, just disintegrated, but presented it on the resume as if they were an MPLS expert. Don't do that, guys. When you're writing your resumes, your CVs, don't make bogus claims like that. Be straight up about what you're doing and what you're not, because if you get a person with any sort of technical acumen on the other side of the table, they're going to pick that stuff apart and you're going to be looking. When you make a false claim on your resume or an overstated claim, you're like trying to pump yourself up and you're exposed because you're just making stuff up pretty much, making a false claim there. It puts the rest of your claims on your resume that makes them look suspect. Like, maybe we can't trust anything that you claimed. How do I know you did anything that you said on this if these different claims are proven to be false? And so, Toni, I think my point in asking that question, actually Holly asked that question, but the idea is vetting that you did what you said you did when you were talking about the Office Edge refresh. And you got right into the nuts and bolts of it pretty quick, like some of the technical challenges and so on with, VRRP betraying you because, VRRP didn't betray you, but an older implementation of it that was no longer compliant betrayed you, and the challenges that you faced there and so on. And it was pretty obvious pretty quickly. You were right up to your elbows in dealing with this particular challenge. But that project could have been a lot of things, and it could have been, again, more of that digging, you said this. Well, that's interesting. Tell us more about, and then digging, going in. But again, for those of you listening, I'm looking for that proof that you did what you said you did on your resume. So don't hand me a resume or CV making claims that you can't back up.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask about the reason why I asked about like how you solve that problem was kind of leading into the next question, but it's important when something goes wrong, well, somebody's got to fix it. And, lucky enough, you had a vendor you could speak to TAC, but there was a manner in which that you could triage that problem. And that, again, lets us know how you think about things. How do you troubleshoot? Because everybody thinks about these things differently. So it's interesting to see how people uncover the root cause of their problems.
Exactly. Again, that how you think is so important. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people that are interviewing these positions are very worried about, do I remember how this specific protocol works in this situation, or what this command does? And those interviews exist. I mean, Holly, I know you went on an interview like this recently. It wasn't for a junior admin position, but I know you interviewed. I don't know if you're willing to chat about it or not, but you went on one of these.
I kind of interviewed for fun. Somebody asked, it's presented a role to me, and it's always good to keep these skills up to standard. And I was greatly underqualified for the role. It was like a role with 7+ years of experience and all these things, but it was an interesting interview. But it's, if you can come in then, yes, I've touched these things, but perhaps I'm not an expert. There's a way about going about interviewing where sometimes you might not have the qualifications, but if you can demonstrate your willingness to learn, your eagerness for the role in the company, and the pace at which you've grown in your current career, sometimes, you don't have to check all the boxes on the hefty list of requirements.
So again, particularly for a junior, admin position, I wouldn't be as worried about having all the technical details right. I mean, keep up, brush up, know your stuff. That's fine. But I almost never ask a Trivial Pursuit kind of interview. I just don't find it productive because you know what you know and you don't know what you don't know, all depending on what your experience level is. And I know trivia that you don't know, and you know trivia that I don't know because we have different experience and we've had different weird things we've had to chase down the rabbit hole or call tack about or whatever it is. I mean, there's esoteric things I can tell you about an ancient Cisco 6500 backplane, depending on the chassis model, that a lot of people don't know because I had to support a ton of them over the years and ran into all the problems. You name it, I ran into them. But I don't know squat about a Juniper chassis, or an Arista chassis by comparison necessarily.
And on that point, it's really important, if you know who's going to be interviewing you, do your research. Figure out what their niche is, what they're interested in, so that you can prep yourself. If you see that you're being interviewed by a data center specialist, go and review all of your data center notes, because they're going to ask you questions about what they're comfortable with. Because they're not going to go into the things that they don't know, because it's no point of reference for them. So make sure that you prep yourself according to the person interviewing you and not according to necessarily your own comfort level, even though they can be quite challenging.
You can find out a lot of things online about the company you're interviewing at, and potentially if you are lucky enough to know the person who's going to be interviewing you, do your homework. Yeah, do your homework. So, Toni, the last question we asked you, and where I think we got your weakest response, was explain how you find answers when you don't have them. That wasn't you said all the right things and you got there in the end, but you started out like almost stumped, like how do I find answers when I don't have them? But so I'll tell you what I was looking for: someone who is independent, a self-starter. You got that curious mind. You're a team player in the sense that you don't want to bother other people looking for answers if you can find a resolution yourself. Why I'm looking for that is because most technology teams are understaffed. There's not enough people to handle all the work. There's too many projects. There's too many deadlines. And if an individual team member is able to keep their projects moving independently, that tends to be helpful for the team. At the same time, you need to ask people questions sometimes. That there's a balance there between I'm going to go it alone and I'm going to ask for help when I need it. On the one hand, you've got people, and I've asked this question of a lot of people, and some people are like, "Oh, I'm going to ask you for the answer to the question," and I'm like, "That's not what you lead with. You ask me when you've done your homework, you've pushed it as far as you can, and you're stuck, man. You've dug through documentation, you've checked with like online communities that maybe support that thing, that software, that hardware you're working on. You've dug through the wiki that maybe is maintained internally, a SharePoint site, whatever it is, and you're just like, man, I cannot figure this thing out." And okay. Then come ask me. You've done your homework. You've checked these, the 6 things that you know to check. Don't start with, "Oh, I'm going to walk over to your cubicle," or "I'm going to call you up on Zoom and see if we can figure this in. You tell me the answer." No, you want someone that can get that, do that homework on their own. Almost every team needs that kind of person, which, Toni, in your defense, that does sound like exactly where you were. Yes, you had internal resources to draw from, a manager and so on, but you were talking about basically everything I just said. You got there in the end. In the beginning, you were like, "I don't know," and then you eventually got there.
And what's interesting is actually previously in our conversation, you had mentioned about posting something in the Packer Pusher Slack channel. So before we asked this question, I assumed that you would have mentioned that as one of your resources because you mentioned it previously. And I mean, we know that you use it. So I think maybe the question you stumped you a little bit in the sense of when we have problems, we just figure it out. And suddenly you've got to think about how do I actually go about figuring these things out? And you don't think about it, you just do it. So it was interesting that kind of I picked up on something earlier on that you could have mentioned again. But, the manner in which you structured the answer, I guess, didn't happen to include that.
Well, all right, guys. I think that's pretty much the questions and the answers and the analysis and some backstory about what we were looking for and some feedback for Toni. But Holly, I guess there's a few other things that we could share here because there's some things we didn't talk about that I'm suspecting people might have questions on. And Toni, feel free to chime in if you have thoughts on any of these. But we didn't address some things that are pretty hard related to interviews in the modern world. I understand that. So the first one would be getting your resume noticed. And I don't know how to solve that problem exactly.
I have some thoughts. And none of them have to do with your resume. I think in today's modern world of recruiting and layoffs and how things are structured, having a cool, great resume with all these things is just not enough. And it sucks, but you can go and apply to 10,000 jobs and your resume just gets filtered through because it's not really a human on the other side looking at things. It's
right.
A system that's looking for 5 keywords. And if your resume doesn't have these 5 keywords, it gets filtered out. And I think it's really, really important to start building a network in your industry, to be active on whatever social media platform you wish. I have tried to start posting more on LinkedIn. I don't particularly enjoy it, but it's been extremely helpful for me. Or if you don't feel comfortable with that, comment on other people's posts, connect with people in the industry, find communities like the Packer Pushers Slack channel so that when push comes to shove, you aren't just relying on a single piece of paper because it's not enough.
Yeah, the AI filtering out everybody's resume. I mean, that's just reality. You are one entrant among dozens, hundreds, thousands in some cases, and AI is filtering that. There's no person is looking at your resume, and so you can have the most awesome resume in the world, and for whatever reason doesn't match, as Holly said, what the AI is looking for, the right keywords or whatever it is. I don't know how to hack that. I don't know how to make that better for you. It sucks. It is what it is, and completely agree. Build your own network, as in human network.
Yeah.
Get to know people, and the way you do that on the internet, blog and and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, Toni, you have anything to add to that?
Go to conferences. I did my first ever conference this year, AutoCon 3, and it's been very helpful.
Yeah.
Also taught me that I know very little.
But you at AutoCon, I take it, met people that you still have some contact with?
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously talked on Slack with some people, so finally got to meet them. Unfortunately, because I'm kind of shy or introverted, talking to randoms is not the easiest.
Yep.
Yeah, same for all of us, almost all of us in this
I
industry.
Like I say, I didn't even say hi to Ethan when I saw him. I just walked past.
And thought in your head, oh, that's Ethan Banks, and then carried on. Right. Yeah.
I kind of had in my head, because Ethan, well, everyone probably knows who he is, but he won't know who I am, and I haven't got nothing interesting to say. That's kind of where my headspace was.
If you ever meet me in person, whoever you are, just listening, I'm very approachable. Just come say hi.
And you also don't have to have anything cool to say. You can just say hi. I never have anything cool to say either, and I don't say hi to people. So I understand that I go to a lot of conferences and things like that, and it is tough. So hi is good enough. You don't have to have a cool catch line.
Nope. Not at all. And conferences are a big deal for many of you. You'd need travel budget and all that. And you're like, I'm never going to get approved to go to a conference. Fine. Look for a local meetup, especially if you're in a metro area. There probably is one. Go to usnua.com, the United States Networking User Association. If you're based in the US, they've got a bunch in various metro areas around the country. And there's other NOGs, network operator groups that are around. If you're in Europe, there's a whole bunch of them. Go to an event like that. They tend to be a lot smaller, a lot less expensive, and they may be completely free, and you can find your tribe in those places. And yeah, do the hard part of the introvert thing, and just say hi to somebody and see what happens. So Another big challenge out there is you may have read about this. There's a fake job posting problem that's out there where companies are posting jobs that aren't real, but they're trying to send signals to the world that they're growing or that they're going to get headcounts for their understaffed teams, but those jobs are never actually going to be filled. I don't know how to solve that problem. I just wanted to acknowledge that it is a real problem. Holly, you're nodding.
Yep. Yeah, I've heard of a couple cases of this, of you just being taken for. I mean, sometimes you go through an entire interview process, not even just like a job post, full on interview processes where you get to the end like, oh yeah, we'll be in contact, and nothing, just radio silence. And it's always good to interview. It's a skill. And if you happen to find yourself in one of these really awful situations, at least you've got some interview practice and you'll move on to the next one.
One more thing I've heard about that's becoming increasingly common are AI interviewers, where you're being interviewed by an AI. Again, you're not talking to a human, so it's a different thing. You're being screened by AI because the humans don't have enough time apparently to do all the information. So my strategy, and I don't know what you guys think of this, but my strategy would be, I'm trying to think about what the AI on the other end is probably going to be doing. I'm assuming they're going to be like summarizing my answers and giving my summarized answers off to either another AI or to a human who's going to, looking for certain things. And so I would want to be, I was going to say verbose, and I don't mean like wasting words, but I mean, this is not the time for imposter syndrome or to be shy or to give terse answers. Give the AI something to chew on if you're being interviewed by an AI. Put words in there that explain in a lot of detail what you're doing so that the summary comes out and is not missing important details. That was the only thought that I've had. I don't know if you guys have considered this, but.
Well, I've got one on the other end, but one thing I would say is there is this methodology that often gets spoken about it's called the STAR methodology, and it's how you should answer questions. And look into it. It's pretty much, you mention the situation, what tasks you did, the action you performed, and the result out of that. And it's a very structured answer to answer questions so that you can keep it concise, but you can also make sure that you've hit every single point that the interviewer is looking for. And I think just in general, it's a great way to answer questions, but AI specifically, it's going to summarize your important points. So make sure that you have mentioned all the important points. You can skip the fluff. It's not going to write how great your personality was and how charming you are. It's going to write about all the great things you've done. So that's really important to make sure that you followed, a structured answer will give a structured summarization.
You called that STAR? That's the acronym?
Yes.
Okay. I had not run into that before. That's really good to know. Okay. So you're telling me if I Google the STAR methodology, something's going to come up?
Yeah, it should.
Excellent. Okay.
The other thing I've heard with regards to AI interviewing, and this is something I would caution interviewees away from, is using AI while you are interviewing. Because I've heard of numerous cases of people being interviewed and they think it's a great idea to have ChatGPT or some other LLM resource running in the background to start answering the questions for them. And you might think that this is smart and no one's going to realize, but people do. And I know that there's people, not personally, but I know of stories where someone has done this and the interviewer obviously caught on, and it's just not worth it. I mean, that's your entire credibility on the line. If you I understand using these types of things to augment yourself, but there's a time and a place. And I think that your credibility lies on your interviewing process, and I just don't think that that's the right time or the right place. So I would just caution you away from that, even if you think it's a great idea. We know, anybody interviewing you knows. They've done 101 interviews, and you can clearly tell when someone's reading out answers or regurgitating stuff that just isn't genuine or their own words.
Yeah. Software. Sorry, go ahead, Toni.
I've literally had that happen. When I had to interview a couple of apprentices, and one of them, we asked a question, then it took some time, and then suddenly the answers came back because it was a remote interview. And we just immediately disregarded that person for position.
Yep. Whether it's a human doing the sensing that an AI was involved in the answer, or it's software. Software can detect these things as well. So, for example, if you're taking a certification exam, software can basically tell if you've memorized all the answers based on how you do your answers and how you respond and so on. This stuff is all detectable. So I'm right there with you both on that. Don't try to cheat your way through the interview. All right, last tip to wrap up this pod for the day. One of the things I've learned over the years is you get a job more because of who you know than what you know. And you may think, I got this cert, or I'm very knowledgeable in these areas, and based on the strength of my technical knowledge, my technical chops, I'm going to land the job. I mean, maybe. But what is going to be way more in your favor is because you know someone at the company who recommended you. Hey, you got to talk to so-and-so. I think they'd be a good fit for the job. That's half the battle won right there. If you can, you walk in with a recommendation to someone that knows you, and you can do halfway decent on the interview, you're in. That's going to turn into a job offer much more likely than if you're someone you're a total unknown to them. You'll come in and off the street. So going back to our point about conferences and getting involved in online communities and writing a blog, doing things that help you engage with other humans so that people can get to know you. That's really important, especially those local meetups. If you can start getting known in the scene. I've done a bunch of meetups that are more regional, and you see some of the same faces. You start to get to know people. One of the network user groups that I organized, we would have a section of, hey, let's talk about jobs. Any of you guys hiring? And inevitably, there'd be 2 or 3 people that raise in, yeah, we're hiring. We're looking for somebody. Okay, that now you've just got an opportunity to meet someone in the flesh. And it's less about what you know and more about who. Make that human connection. That can be the biggest leg up you're ever going to get into landing that position you're looking for.
100%. I mean, that's why I got an interview for a role that was greatly out of my skill set, because someone knew me and they're like, go for it. I would have never applied. So make sure that you build your network and your home network, both of them.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, Toni, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been awesome. And thank you, listeners, for listening to our mock interview episode. I really hope it's been helpful. Hopefully you've jotted down some tips and feel confident on landing your next role. If you have any comments, questions, or, actuallys on this episode, send it to packetpushers.net/follow-up. That sends your feedback straight to the private channel in Slack that Ethan and I are in. And we add it to the list and sometimes add it to our episodes. We love to throw that in the mix. Like, share, and subscribe. We really appreciate it. We want to make N is for Networking the #1 Packet Pushers show. And there are lots of shows, a lot of competition, and I love to win. And if you aren't aware, just search for Packet Pushers anywhere that you get your podcast to find those other channels. And just head to packetpushers.net in your browser. And last but not least, just remember, networking isn't hard. Other people have figured it out, so you can too.